Hello, and welcome to the Mental Approach Podcast, where we explore mindfulness and a mental approach to the youth sport game. Today, our guest is Rob Pallante. He is the founder of Mindset Bodybank, which is a mental performance coaching company, and I'd say probably focused on hockey, but you'll have clients from all over the place, don't you?
I do. I have a few different sports that I dabble in.
Perfect. What ones?
So football, actually, it's so being a former hockey player, I thought hockey was going to be the easy transition into that sport, and it turned out that my previous reputation when I played preceded me. And when I said I was coming and doing mental performance, they focused more on the mental side and who I used to be, rather than the mental game that I actually coach now. So football opened up to me initially, and I had a couple of CFL guys and good friend of mine ran a program out of Mississauga called Football North,
Okay, yeah,
and
I
so
never
I had
heard of it.
those young players, and actually one of the very first guys that I was working with and mentoring. His name's Kyle Herglin, just up the road on the other side of the highway from you. He just signed with the New Orleans Saints, and he's
Oh,
at camp.
great.
I get an opportunity to speak with him every day or every week, a couple times a week.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
he's I've watched him come from high school in Clarkson to um, you know the NFL, which is his dream, and had the opportunity. I was one of the people he invited to go to the draft with him, so it was a very
Well,
cool
oh,
experience.
that's very cool.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
got
I
a
was
swimmer who's an Olympic hopeful. So
There you go. Well, when I was reviewing some of your web materials and everything, and I noticed Matt Cook, I guess was either a client or a partner or something early on.
Matt was somebody that I was connecting with, and I had him on my pod. I had a podcast as well, as we were talking about off air, and so got to know Matt a little bit. And I was part of a group called One for All, which was a bunch of former ex athletes that came together to work with existing athletes. And help them transition from wherever they were in their sport, typically middle of their career, and help them transition out and back into what we call real life.
Well, that's cool actually. Well, it made me laugh when I saw it because I used to live in Barrie and used to attend Barrie Colts games from the very early days. And my favorite chirp, we sat right above the penalty box, so the visitors' penalty box, and Sean Avery came into the penalty box in a playoff game, and I think he was playing for Kingston at the time, and he was being mouthy like Sean is, and I yelled down, I go, "Come on, you got knocked out in an All-Star game by Matt Cook." He lost his mind, started hosing us down with the water bottle, and then after his penalty, Mavity sat him on the end of the bench for a period. I thought, "Hey, sixth man, we did our job," right? But I thought, I never forgot that. I was like, Matt was he played the game a tough way. I mean, All-Star game and absolutely laying somebody out. So it was
Yeah.
it definitely that, and
I
he
think
played for a long
sometimes
time.
the image that they carry on the ice is different than their image off of the ice, right?
Oh,
And
one hundred
that's
percent. I mean, every hockey player I've ever met. I remember meeting Scott Stevens. I mean, he ended a few people's careers, and Lindros being one of them famously. And we were at a golf event, and somebody introduced me to him, and I went in really hard to shake his hand, and he was just really soft and gentle with his handshake because I thought he was going to crush me, right? And was just a very nice, amiable dude. Uh, but put the bucket on, and you want to watch out if you're playing against him for sure. Uh,
absolutely that big part of what I do too is help to define the player versus the person. It's an important role, understanding who you are when you step into the arena and who you really are.
Right. It's kind of
Two
like the
different egos.
Kobe Mamba mentality, right? He was a different guy
Totally,
on the court than
absolutely.
off the court. So one of the things, so how did you get started on this journey? I mean, you played some NCAA hockey. If you look up your stats online, you're a bit of a suitcase, bounced around a little bit, and trying to keep hockey going. But so how do you get here? How does this happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, how does it happen? I think everything happens for a reason, and I was a high OHL draft pick coming out of midget hockey back in 1986. Rated in the second round, went 52nd overall, drafted by Sudbury. Had options at that point. My dad was a former St. Mike's hockey and football player. And
Okay.
back then, he could play major, junior, and go to school. So he attended Michigan Tech, and really, at the time, we had to make a decision: are you going to declare to go to the O, or are you going to play college hockey? So my dad kind of pushed me towards the education side based on who drafted me. Sudbury wasn't exactly a flourishing team at that time, back in the early 80s, 86, 87, mid 80s, I guess. And so I decided not to attend camp and stay back, play a year of junior B. Um, and so I did. I played a year of Bramalea. I had a bunch of scholarship offers. Michigan Tech came along and offered me a full ride after my first year. Some of the other schools were saying, "Wait, play another year, develop." Hindsight being 2020, maybe that's what I should have done. But um, regardless, I chose to go to Michigan Tech. Walked onto campus as a true freshman, just turned 18 years old. Head was this big, and I'm going to be like, the big man on campus. My dad went here, had a record for most points by a freshman defenseman. I was kind of coming in gunning for pops. On campus 3 days, got in a fight with Randy McKay. Him and I were fighting five guys at a frat party, broke my hand.
Jesus.
And so that started this downward spiral in my career, and the first time that I really had any adversity. Um, I was challenged to get back into the lineup for the next 3 years and couldn't figure this out. And this is where it all started. So if you're asking where it started then. Um, I was fortunate enough that I had enough talent to get invited to a few NHL camps. I went to the Minnesota North Stars camp as an invite. Because of my injury, I missed my draft year, and second year played 6 games, and then the next year um, uh, I made it to Christmas time, and then had another run in with my coach, which pretty much ended my college career. And so then I came back. I played a half a year of junior B, went to Acadia for 2 years, or half a year junior B, went to Acadia for 2 years, and then got invited to a bunch of NHL camps. Chose the North Stars when they were still in Minnesota. I think it was 92. Had a really good camp. That's where I was introduced to fighting. And my first one happened on day one of camp. A gentleman by the name of Reed Simpson, who had already played 3 years in the American League. He just got traded to Minnesota. I went in the corner on my first shift to pick up the puck. He ran me from behind. I turned around, his gloves were off. Away we go. Apparently, I did okay. I held my own. Had to go in for some repairs because I needed 24 stitches in my mouth.
Jeez.
My teeth went through my lip, and came back out, finished day one. Had a couple other run-ins with some vets and started to get pigeonholed into a role. They wanted to keep me around, not on contract, sent me down to Kalamazoo. I went through their training camp, same thing. Still hadn't signed a contract, wondering where I'm going to wind up playing. And they kept encouraging me to stick around. I went down to Dayton, Ohio in the East Coast League, and Claude Noel was the coach there. Um, I lasted a couple of games, the training camp, and then I got traded to Nashville to a gentleman by the name of Nick Fatillo was my coach,
Okay, I
and he
know that
liked
name. Yeah.
the fact that I was a gamer, and so that was the beginning of my pro hockey career. At the top, quickly descended down to the coast, and wind up finishing that year in the Sunshine Hockey League, playing in West Palm Beach for a gentleman by the name of Bill Nyrop. Won a championship, and there was a lot of adversity on where I thought I was going to be and where I ended up. And you pick up a lot of bad habits along the way, and it's part of the hockey culture that we can talk about and what needs to change. Anyways, I played a couple years, got out of the game, got into the corporate world, um, was very successful for a number of years, and it wasn't until August 22nd, 2015. I was going through a divorce, 2 young kids. I was on my Harley, and I got hit head on. I was coming down from a buddy's place where I was couch surfing while my wife and kids were still in the house, and we were figuring out what to do. I was coming to pick up my daughter to take her to, I was coaching her U7 or U8 soccer team. They were having their season end final festival, and I was going to take her for a ride on the bike 2 blocks away from the house. I never got to the house. Got hit head on, crushed the left side of my body, and spent 40 days in Hamilton General recovering, 2 weeks in ICU. And a big catalyst or turning point for me was getting out of ICU. And I had a nurse come to me and say, you know, um, you've been given a second chance at life. We've had people in here with less injuries than you not survive. Don't waste it. You never really know what that means because I'm sitting there and I'm all hooked up and I got tubes everywhere. I'm fighting for my life, and that what she said to me stuck with me. So I had 2 years of rehab and a long recovery to get back with, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect on the person that I was and who I thought I was, and own a lot of the decisions that I made. Stop finger pointing, quit making excuses, as we often do when things don't work out our way. I didn't want to be that guy sitting around going, "Yeah, I should have played in the NHL, but this coach screwed me and that happened." And no, everything happened for a reason. Now here I find myself, what can I do with all of these experiences? And it was, how do I give back now? How do I become a servant leader? How do I talk to a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid who's thinks he's got it made because he just got drafted in the OHL, and help prepare him for what's really coming? And that's
Boy,
life.
is that number one unbelievable. Um, I had another guest, very similar thing, traumatic injury, and really flipped where they were at and where they were going, and it sort of changed their purpose. But absolutely, when you talk about kids getting drafted into the OHL, and for those listening, obviously in Ontario and across Canada, the Canadian Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, Major Junior Hockey is a big focus for a lot of people. It's a big path to the NHL for those kids that want to go. And I've had a lot of experience. We housed a number of players called a billet family, where they're kind of home away from home. And let's step into that, because the one thing I always saw was everybody coming to camp who's been drafted or invited sometimes was probably the best player on their team. And now they're on the ice with 25, 30 guys in training camp that were all the best player on their team. And they can't figure out where they fit necessarily. Like, oh my God, I used to be a first line center and I got power play and I got penalty kill and now I'm on the fourth line and I'm a winger and and the mental aspect, I saw it so much with the kids. There was such a roller coaster. And I always thought, I go, geez, that's part of how this all kind of came together, because I thought about nobody's given these kids, their parents are spending thousands of dollars on skating and stick handling, and they're not spending a nickel on the 6 inches between their ears or from the neck up, whatever you want to call it. And they get here, they're exceptional individuals and incredibly skilled, and then they can't deal with the fact that they not getting any ice time. And so, I'll just add one to it. I mean, I had a kid who lived with us, um, was a was an overseas kid, was a European import. Jeff Krazakos, who was the AGM, who I know is a friend of yours or somebody who you know, had said to me, he goes, "This kid, he's an underager. He will be a top 10 NHL draft pick." The kid, when he came to our house, he was 6'3", 180 pounds, unbelievably skilled kid, super shy, super shy. And, we tried to work with him to help him get out of his shell a little bit. We had young kids, so they're always in his face a little bit, keeping him going. But his mom was constantly interfering, and we'll explore that as well. He should get more ice time. He should this. And I kept telling the dad and the kid and the mom, he's getting more ice time than Owen Tippett when he was a rookie. And Owen Tippett was a 10th overall pick in the NHL. I said, trust the process. He needs to understand what's going on. If he was the best player on the ice, he would, trust me, they would play him. He's going to have 3 years in this league. And you know what? At Christmas time, he went home to visit his family and he never came back. And that was the end of it for him. And so I think, things like, you know, understanding a little bit more on how to be a little bit more mentally tough could certainly help. So somewhere in there's got to be a question. But one of the things that struck me that I thought was unique um, from your approach is you talking about, people are like, oh, let's meditate, let's do breath work, and all those things are awesome. We know that. But you talked about finding a purpose. So maybe share a little bit about that and how that's important to kind of the whole package of this.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. You hit on a number of different points.
I know.
At the beginning, it was sounding like a commercial for my mental performance program. You're talking about the 6 inches between the ears being the most important thing, which it is really. And we spend all this money on, skating and shooting and all of the skills and nutrition and working out, but we're not working this. And it's funny because, one of the first things when I work with a team, I do one-on-one, but I also do teams. One of the first questions I ask when I'm working with a team is, how many, what percentage of you guys, do you think is your game mental, right? And you'll hear anything from between 60 to 80% or higher. And I'll go, well, how much time a week do you work on the mental part of your game? And it's usually less than 5%. So my approach is, if we look at their skills, you've got like a table or a chair, four legs, right? You've got the technical, tactical, physical, and the mental. Well, the first three are pretty much always taken care of: the technical, tactical, and the physical. Players always working on the physical, the coach is working on the technical and the tactical stuff. So they're good in those areas. But the fourth leg that's going to help balance that table or that chair is the mental. And that's where the biggest gap is right now. And kids that are looking for that advantage, because as you just led into, you got 25 players coming together and they were all the best on their team. When talent meets talent, what's the separator? It's not more talent. It's the mental part of the game, right? Had this kid have come back at Christmas and changed the way that he was thinking and approaching the game, he maybe could have been a top first round pick,
I
but maybe
agree.
we'll never know, right? So really my approach is let's help build some a foundation for who you are going to be. And that is, before I get into talking about the sports or the game, I want to do a deeper dive into the person and help them connect to something and a reason why they're playing. Every kid's playing because they love to play. Well, most of them. Some might be playing because the parents are still pushing them, right? But once you get up to that junior level, you're playing because you still love the game and you think that there's an opportunity. But why? Why? And then you can go 5 levels of why. You got to peel back the onion a little bit, right? Well, maybe it's they came from a family that didn't have a whole lot of money. They're looking to find a way out, pay some hospital bills for a family member, create a better life for themselves, be that one person that's able to turn around and create a legacy for their family and create wealth. And it's all tied to money. We understand that, but the purpose is bigger. It's not just to score goals, right? And to get your name on a billboard. And when you're able to connect with that purpose or that why, when you're faced with adversity, those are the things that are going to help you get past that, right? Get past that adversity, get over those hurdles, find a way, because you've been challenged in some way, and your purpose now is bigger than just yourself. And when you find something that's bigger than yourself, then all of a sudden you have a reason to continue the fight and find a way forward. And so me helping young people understand that, when that light goes off and they have that aha moment, you'll start to see a change, right? And that's pretty much what I try to do is shift the way they think about things. And mental performance is not about developing more of the skills that you already have, but it's looking at things differently than you may have in the past, right? So if I'm looking at my wallet, right? If I hold it like this, well, it's thin because there's not a lot of money in it right now, and it's rectangular. But what if I turn it this way and this way? Right? It gives you a different perspective, and if you can look at some of your problems with a different perspective, like I had to do, as I was talking about, my accident, it made me look back on my life differently. And now going forward, my purpose really is to be a servant leader and try and help as many young hockey players, athletes, and families as possible, so that when sports is over, because it's going to end someday, that you wake up the next day and you realize, I have a purpose. I'm not the jersey that I'm wearing. I'm not the position that I played. I am not the sport that I played. That's what I did. Who I am. I've developed a self-awareness of who I am, and I can wake up the next day now and continue on with my life. And that's a challenge for a lot of athletes when they
Sure.
get to that point in their career. I know a ton of guys that woke up and they were so used to being at the rink at a certain time, having dinner, lunch, everything was planned. And now you've got all this time and no purpose.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's when
fair.
that's
That's
when challenges really kick.
totally fair because, perhaps, alcohol leaks in or drugs leak in and things like that, that maybe you were doing when you're, once in a while recreationally. And then all of a sudden can become a problem when you're not sure where you're going. So there's a lot of
And it
things
happens.
that
We
go to it.
both know it happens more than occasionally, right?
Yeah.
It's, the hockey world
100%.
is a big part of the lifestyle. And now maybe I'm hoping it's changing because the conditioning of the players and the 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 level, that the standard that they have to be at on a regular basis was different than it was 25, 30 years ago, right?
Well, 100%. I remember talking to kids and they said that they don't know a single player who smokes. Like, just it is what it is. Like when you're at that level, it's like there's no more Guy Lafleur standing in the hallway, putting back two or three darts in between periods, right?
They have a couple darts between periods.
Yeah, got to get a little oxygen. It was totally a different time. I mean, I remember Ron Hogarth telling a story about doing like a barnstorming NHLer thing, and he gave all the players like a case of O. Henry bars because they were a sponsor, and the players are supposed to go out and toss them into the crowd in between periods. And so at the end of the first period, he's okay, guys, grab the bars, gonna come out. And Guy Lafleur goes, "What?" He goes, "The chocolate bars. Oh, I ate them.
Yeah.
He ate the whole box the night before." Right. So it's just comical, right? With totally different world back then. They did whatever they did. Um, so one thing that, you talked about service-based leadership, and I think that's really important because I talked to another coach, a baseball guy, and it's one thing I noticed about their program was they were there for the kids. And I find in hockey especially, and we'll maybe talk about the toxic nature of AAA hockey and the GTHL here in Toronto, but it feels to me when I watch games, and I know a lot of families and a lot of kids who are going through it, um, that the kids are almost there to serve the coaches. And they're maybe it's their egos or their careers or whatever it is. How do you talk to a kid about how to deal with that sort of situation when they're not necessarily being treated in the right fashion when they're going to the rink, and how do they deal with that and then kind of be able to overcome that?
Yeah. Great question. And I think the way I'm interpreting what you're saying is some coaches coach just to win, and players might be being brought in or lured there by shiny objects and this idea that winning is the way to get me to where I want to go to the next level. And no doubt, look, if you're playing at the AAA level in Toronto, there's a lot of pressure to win, and there are organizations that tend to draw players more than others just because of the lure of wearing the Marley crest, or the
JRC.
JRC has become a big one, and Von Kings is another
Yeah,
organization that
absolutely.
tends to draw it. I think ultimately what you want to do as a player, and hopefully at the younger ages with the guidance of a parent, is not to get sucked into just going to a team just to win. And as you talked about, when you get to that next level and you're one of 25 guys that's the best player on the team, where's the best team for you in your situation for you to develop? If you're not developing as a player and you're just on a team that's winning, and you're a third line player, or you're a 5 or 6 D man, then are you really developing? And I think it's the attraction that both the parents and the players get sucked into. And there are coaches that don't develop players, but they have winning programs because they're really good at recruiting. And the association, and I don't know anything for sure, but there are associations that put some money aside for those type of players, and allow them to come to teams and stack their teams, and look at us, and we're winning everything, right?
Yeah. I
And
call those I call those people, it happens in the baseball world as well. My son plays a high level of baseball. I call them collectors, not developers. They go around trying to collect talent to make it seem like they're developing talent.
yeah, yeah, that's it. And that's a big part of. So I coach the Mississauga Senators organization. I got to give them a little plug. And what we don't do is, obviously we're trying to recruit the best players, but we're trying to do it in a way that when you come to our team, we're not going to tell you that we're going to win a championship. Our goal is to win as many games as possible. But we'll tell you this: your player is going to start here, parents, and he's going to finish here. And that's the most important thing. He is going to learn skills in practice. He's going to learn skills on the ice and off the ice. I bring a big element of what I do from a mental performance side into that locker room. And it's all about raising your standard as a player. It's not show up, wait for the coach to tell you what to do, go out and execute it, and then play a game and score a bunch of goals. No, it starts with, what does the locker room look like when you walk in there? Let's leave it cleaner than when we got in it, right? Let's pick up our thing. Like, the kids look at me sometimes like I got 3 heads, right? But I'm like, hey, you see those things above your head? They're hooks. Hang your clothes on them. Don't leave them in a pile. You know, when you're done, put your tape in the garbage. And I come in before they leave the room, and I go, nobody leaves until all the garbage is picked up. And then, well, what does that have to do with playing? It has nothing to do with about playing, but it's about character and it's about the standard. Now, if you get used to doing that, that's just a little small thing. Now, when we ask you to do something on the ice and we ask you to push yourself, now you're starting to round out who you are, right? We want to raise the levels of everything that you're doing. And, I put the kids on a program: get up in the morning. We want you making your bed. I don't make my bed. My mom makes my bed. Well, no, you're going to make your bed now, right? And then it gets into other things, other habits that we try and create. I'm a big believer in rituals, routines through repetition. And the more we repeat these rituals and these routines, the less we have to think about them. And we know that our brain loves efficiency, and it only becomes efficient when we do things over and over and over again. So they may suck at the beginning, but it's all about character development and raising our standards as individuals. And hopefully, those will be things that you're able to carry with you when the game is done.
Well, and it creates discipline too. I mean, it allows you, just I'm going to do these things. They're non-negotiables. I make them happen. I mean, when I was in high school, I remember watching Herschel Walker talk about how he would do as many push-ups and sit-ups in commercial breaks. Now, kids don't know what commercial breaks are anymore on television, but I was literally bought into that, and I was like, right on, and I would do it. I would do it, and it was like it just became. I'd watch TV and I'd be working out. So I watched 2 hours of TV and I'd probably get like 15 sets of push-ups and sit-ups in there. And when I went to an Ontario rugby combine, 60 push-ups in 60 seconds, 60 sit-ups in 60 seconds. And it was all because I did that all the time, right? There's other things I wasn't great at, but that was one thing in the testing. They were like, holy crap, who, like, nobody's done that. And it's just because I made it a thing, right? There wasn't gym work back then, but it was a way to work out. So let me pivot a little bit too. Like, so let's say you're working with a player, maybe they're 14, 15 years old, they're coming into their draft year, they're really focused on the mental performance side, maybe they're doing meditation. How do you get them to get over the hump of being seen as different, I guess, from everybody on the team, right? Because, I gotta tell you, like, hockey culture, for those that don't know it, you're constantly being chirped by your buddies and everything else. And I think sometimes that can take kids out of doing things that are good for them, or for themselves, because they want to fit in and they don't want to be different. How do you get them over that hump of, stick to your guns and do what's right for you, and kind of and move forward that way?
Yeah, one of the first things that I tell the kids is remember this statement: other people's opinions of you are none of your business. And they kind of look at me sometimes, and it's a difficult thing. But as we were talking off air, as much as you're working on all your stick handling skills and your skating skills, mental skills require a lot of practice too. And there's your as you mentioned, the hockey culture, you're chirping and guys are chirping, and there's a lot of talk on the ice. And I call it the cookie jar. Guys are trying to get in your cookie jar, right? So I go, you got to slam that cookie jar and strap it shut, and not worry about other people's opinions. And that might also include your parents and your coaches. And this is where you have to develop that belief in yourself and that goal that you're trying to achieve, that no matter what happens, you are not going to be distracted from it. And if that means that, you're going to spend some time doing breath work and meditation, and, maybe I choose different words rather than meditation, I'll call it visualization, right? Or we'll call them mental reps, because if I'm able to demonstrate to you that by doing these mental reps or using visualization, that it's going to increase your production on the ice and get you into a place where A, you're more confident, and B, you're able to deal with stepping over those mistakes that are going to happen and allow you to play in the zone more often, would you not want to do that, regardless of what your friends think about you? And so maybe you become, I teach kids, maybe you become the catalyst to have them come doing what you're doing. And it's this balance between what I say is sometimes you need to be selfish to be selfless. And they, well, what does that mean, coach? What does that mean? Well, if you're doing all these things that are making you better, and you're showing up at practice with one or two intentions, which are, okay, for me personally, I need to work on my shot and being more intentional with how I shoot. And I got to pick pucks up off the boards a little bit cleaner. Okay, so during practice, you're looking for those opportunities to work on those two things for yourself. That's not for the team, or is it? It's improving you, but by being selfish with those things, now you're being selfless because you're helping the team. If everybody thought that way, now you're creating a culture within the team where everybody is showing up working on one or two intentions. Not that the coach has to tell you, because the coach is going to run you through drills and practice and tell you all the things you need to do, but you're working on the little things that are going to improve your game on the ice and off the ice. If that means you need to take 10 minutes to do some visualization and some mental prep work before you get to the rink, knowing that when you cross a threshold, and what I try to do is create these physical boundaries sometimes that a player can recognize. Hey, I'm now crossing the boundary from the parking lot. I'm stepping into the rink. I now have to switch my mindset. I'm not Johnny the student anymore. I'm now Johnny the hockey player. And he reacts different to things than Johnny the student. And now we're going to leave school at the front door. And as we head into the rink, now I'm thinking about, what do I need to do to be the best version of myself when I step on that ice today, every single time. And by starting to get them to think about things like that, now you're starting to change habits and you're changing routines. You're adding an element of discipline. And now what the other guys say doesn't really matter, because it should be showing up in their ice time and their performance.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well, I mean, we could talk for days about some of this stuff, and I'd like to delve into one thing, and we'll try to keep it somewhat brief. But parents, maybe expand on what you see, and how a parent can positively or negatively affect their player while they're playing the sport.
So, it's a, it's a very touchy topic at times, right? Because I don't think that any parent deliberately is trying to sabotage their son or daughter's ability to perform. And I think a lot of times it's just being overzealous or, this helicopter type parent. I read a quote, or it was a quote, or I saw it, where they were asking an individual who was very successful, what's the best thing to do for a child that comes from a wealthy family to teach them life lessons? It says, and the response was not to fix everything for them, let them suffer a little bit, right? And so we as parents have to, and I'm a parent and I got a 20-year-old son who played, and I can say this now, probably the reason he quit hockey was because of me at the time. I probably pushed him a little bit too hard. He had a father who played a level of hockey that, maybe he felt he wasn't going to be able to get to, and I kind of pushed him out of the game, and I own that now. And it was, working with parents now, what I try and tell them is get your kid to the rink on time if they're not driving, sit in the stands, cheer for them. And one of the worst things you can do is smother them after a game they didn't do well on that car ride home. And I actually wrote a piece about the car ride home and how much that car ride home influences that young player and that individual. It's a very vulnerable time for them. And typically, if they haven't had a good game or the team didn't perform well or they had an off night, they know it. And they've heard it from the
100.
coach after the game. The last thing they want to do is hear from a parent on the ride home. Now, I can tell you that, in the 5 or 6 years I've been coaching in the GTHL, there haven't been many parents that have played at the level that I have. So you're giving your kid instructions and you've never strapped on a pair of skates, or you played house league and now they're playing at a triple A level. It's different. And
100.
so, the best advice I could give you is, let's not reward them for goals and points, because now what you're telling them is they're only good enough if the outcome meets your requirements, right? And what I try to do is shift their thinking away from outcomes, because we don't control those, and just focus on the process. So let's not be buying the McDonald's or giving them 10 or 20. Well, I've heard kids that get $20 if they score a goal, right? Like I wish I got $20 for scoring a goal back when I played. That would be like about a quarter of my salary back then. And I got $50 a fight, but that's a whole other story. Um,
Jeez.
and let's not reward them for outcomes that they don't control. Let's not pepper them with questions like, how do you think you played, and why weren't you doing this, and because they know those things. The best thing to do is say, hey, you know what? I really enjoy watching you play. I love that you love the game, and just leave it at that, and let them know that you love them and you support them on the ride home, because now they're trapped in that car and they got to listen to you. Now they're going to leave and they're going to start to resent the car ride home. And this all came to me when I first started in my program. I worked with a U16 AAA team during COVID. So I had these kids for an hour a week for 16 weeks, trying to keep them mentally prepared for whenever they were able to get back on the ice. And I asked the question once, completely thinking I was expecting a different answer. And I said, what's your biggest fear? And I kid you not, half of the kids raised their hand and said it was the car ride home. So what does that tell you? And we know, looking at statistics from Hockey Canada, at 14, 15 years old, there's a drop off rate.
100%.
Why is that? The number one reason is the car ride home. It's the parents that are pushing the kids, and now it's not fun anymore. And when the game stops being fun, why do they want to go and sit in a car and listen to you, tell them about things that you haven't really experienced? And now they're ridiculed, and they feel that their self-worth is only based on how they perform in a sport.
Yeah.
That
No,
they have that their chances of making a career out of is 0.025%.
yeah, correct. I mean, it's funny how, I think potentially, I felt that maybe I was being a little pushy with my son in baseball, and maybe not purposely, but but overbearing. I could almost sense it to myself. And I, you know, the past year, I just said to him, I go, hey, are you enjoying playing? Like, we love you regardless of whether you play baseball or not. Like, and that's not, that's like back to what you said. That's not who you are. You're yourself. That's just a game that you play. And you know what? If you're not interested in playing anymore, then it's okay. It's not conditional. Like our love for you isn't conditional on that. And like, and it seems like a simple thing to say, but I just felt like maybe he needed to hear that. And he's not shared, oh, thanks that, whatever. And maybe he watches this and comes to me and say, oh, that's why'd you say that? But it's one of those things that I just felt it was important for him to know that it didn't matter. And he had a game a couple weeks ago where I think he missed like four or five balls, five fly balls. And I was sitting there in the chair just shaking my head going, what is going on out there? And he came, the game went on anyways. The whole team wasn't playing well, but he especially wasn't playing well. And we get to the car and I don't say anything. And he says, that was the worst game of baseball I've ever played in my life. And I started laughing and I said, well, you're probably right. I've watched you play a lot since you've been 6 years old. Um, but I'll tell you what I thought was interesting. And he said, what's that? I said, well, after you made all those errors in the one inning, you could have just like folded up like a cheap suitcase and bad body language and whatever. But you were batting the next inning and you came up and you had a great at bat and you actually got a single and got on. And I said, that to me showed that you have some resilience in there. So you know what? It's a sport of failure. Move on. Tomorrow's another day. And he goes, okay. And then you know what? 2 games later, he was unbelievable. Threw a guy out trying to steal from the outfield, like just different things. Like he just, you know, rather than getting on him about, he knew, he
They,
knew,
they
yeah,
know.
one hundred
You know, I
percent.
think that's, there's a lesson in what the way you handled that, Todd, was perfect. Get in the car and don't say anything. Ask him, what he wants to do for dinner or what movie you're going to watch. Like they know. And if you give them this space and let them bring it up, they'll tell you everything you want to hear.
Oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah, and
know,
I didn't
that's,
really. I felt he didn't need any advice. It just was what it was. And and I think in the past I might have been like, well, that was a waste of time. Like I might have said something really stupid, right? And I don't know why. Maybe it's all this work I'm doing around this part of the world of sport, and it's kind of, yeah, it's rubbing off on me. Hopefully, in a good way. So I want to the way I wrap up is I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and we'll start. I got like about four or five. So, what's the best advice you ever received, and from who?
the best advice I ever received and from who? Hmm. Probably my father, because I got a lot of advice from my father. And, it was it wasn't a specific saying, but it was just continuous along these lines of what we're talking about with parents. He's like, it was that reassurance that no matter what happened or how I played, that they love me. And and I think that's always carried with me. And, you know, um, I think that's really relative to how I was raised, and I never had those. I never had the only time my father would yell at me is if I wasn't putting in an effort on the ice. He said nothing. He just usually watched. We went home after the game, left it up to me to discuss it. But if I wasn't putting in an effort from the rafters up at the top, I'd hear skate. I knew who that was, and I'm like, okay, I gotta get my ass in gear because I'm floating out here today. So.
That's funny. So, what's one book you would recommend?
Oh man. I'm looking at my. I'll tell you the book that changed everything for me, and it was Think and Grow Rich. So that would be the book that I would say. That was the book I read while I was in the hospital, and it put me on this trajectory.
Awesome. What would you tell? And obviously, you've got it's kind of funny. I looked over and I actually have that book. It's actually sticking out on the bookshelf. A little edge of it is sticking out. That's rather serendipitous. Um, what would you tell teenage you? If you kind of go back 15, 16 you? what would you say to
I would
yourself?
probably be looking at 18-year-old me when I started to hit that some of that adversity when I was in college. I would say, stay the course, show up, work hard, and don't let other people's opinions of you influence your behavior.
Perfect. When it comes to mental performance, what's one small change people can make in their daily routine that would start to make a difference?
Um, One small from the mental thing, I would say is let go of outcomes and just focus on process. One of the hardest things is well, let's make it easy. Is trying to be present. Learning to just be in the moment is something that I work on a daily basis, and I try and get a lot of athletes. When you do that, now you're letting go of thoughts from the past and the future. And the biggest thing is understanding that neither one of those exist, and all we have is the choices we make right here and right now.
Awesome. So, listeners, you can find in the show notes all of Rob Palente's social media stuff. You can follow him and everything else. And I ask you to like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for having me.